And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Friday, July 19th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Matt Belman. No Laffy today. We actually get to have a good show. We're brought to you by Pick Six. Have not talked about baseball in a week. I've barely talked about it in the past 3 weeks. I am now ready to dive in. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow us both on Twitter. Bellman, what's going on, man? Long time no talk.
Yeah, long time no see. Happy we got a chance to chop it up a little bit before the show started. Real pumped to be doing this show with you. I know you are just settling in back from a long trip, so welcome back.
Yeah. It's good to be back. I'm excited to do everything we're about to do. I've been itching to play some DFS. It's really weird when the All-Star break happens and there's just like nothing going on for a couple of days. Normally I want that refresh, but because I took a trip right before it, I was kind of like desperate to get back into it. So it's nice to be able to talk about some baseball and like chop it up a little bit here about some DFS. So we're back.
You know that there was really nothing going on when they had 10K to first summer league contests and
Oh
that
my
were
God.
filling. Yeah, it takes a true DFS soldier to stay in those summer league streets, not gonna lie.
Yeah, that is not for me. I don't ever mess around with summer league. That's not the way that I want to do it. So it's nice to have baseball back. We've got a couple interesting spots today. We've got the Giants in Coors. That is going to be an interesting talking point for sure. But again, guys, hit that like button. We're back. We've got a lot going on, lots to talk about. I'm ready to dive in if you are.
I am ready.
Well, let's do it. I've got my lineups run. I know what I would have if we were locking right now, but we're not. We don't lock for another 8 hours or so. So we're going to break down the pitching to start the day. Highest owned guy on today's slate, 9K, Garrett Cole. Hunter Brown, not too far behind. He's about 20% owned. He's 8,400. And then Luis Castillo, just behind Garrett Cole. Basically the same. These are the two highest owned guys. Castillo, 8,200. When you look at pitching, does your eye immediately go to Cole, to Castillo, to Brown? Are you looking anywhere else? I'm really curious where you land.
For me, the only guy that I immediately land on that I like, and I don't love him, but I like him, is Hunter Brown.
Okay.
I don't like the pitching today. Now, that's not to say there aren't good pitchers, because clearly they are, but they're all, most of them are in really tough spots. And we don't have like Jacob deGrom or Paul Skeens on this slate. Like, there are good pitchers, but Garrett Cole isn't the Garrett Cole of the last year as of right now. So just going to him first. I understand the ownership because of the matchup, and there just isn't a lot on this slate as far as pitching goes in my mind. I really don't love it though. Like, he's been not great so far this year. Now, he's got the pedigree where you obviously presume that he's going to be, Garrett Cole sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with that ownership when he's priced. He's cheap for who you think Garrett Cole is, but he's still 9K. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with Cole yet, but at first glance, I don't love it. How about you?
I think he's like properly owned, given what we see for the rest of the slate. He's not exactly someone that I'm super excited to get to at 9K, given some of the savings you can get elsewhere. The Rays are obviously a solid lineup. Not the biggest strikeout matchup in the world. It's fine. Cole has been very weird since he's been back. He's given up, massive power to righties. He's given up quite a bit of it to lefties. He tends to give up a little bit more power than you would expect, but you can usually just neutralize that with strikeouts. 20% K rate to righties, only 140 pitches, 28 to lefties, around 270 pitches. I feel okay about Cole, and I'm right around the field on him. I'm happy that I don't have a big stand, though. I don't think that I'd be comfortable there. The guy that I have the most of is Hunter Brown. Tends to be the guy that I end up getting the most of on most of these slates. He, to me, is just always a couple $100 underpriced for where he should be. Decent strikeout matchup here against Seattle.
Elite strikeout matchup.
Yeah, he's probably the best combination of upside and price for today.
Yeah, he stands out to me as well. And I'll say this about Cole. Like, he pitched well last time out before the All-Star break against Baltimore. So like, I think people are seeing that and like, buying into maybe he's on his way back, and I'm hesitant, but at the same time, it's still Garrett Cole. So like at his height, he's the best DFS pitcher on this slate. So I'm kind of with you. If I played 3 lineups right now, I'd probably have him once.
Oh, let's talk Luis Castillo, because those are the 3 guys then that are in 20% or higher in ownership. And obviously Castillo on the opposite side here of Hunter Brown, much worse spot for Castillo. It's a better lineup for Houston. There's less strikeouts for sure in the Houston lineup, particularly at the top. How are you feeling about Castillo here, given the fact that he's 8,200?
Man, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't love Castillo here. And I'm a big Castillo fan. I think he's a really, really good pitcher in real life, and he's a very good DFS pitcher. And he's too cheap for who he is at 8,200. But you look at who he's been this year, and then you factor in the matchup and the ownership. Honestly, I feel kind of similar about Castillo as I do Cole. Like, I don't think they're bad plays. I just don't think they stand out like the ownership is showing they do. That said, it's not like either of these guys are 50% owned. I mean, they're coming in slightly under 30. So that's kind of what we're working with on this slate. I don't say that and then have other guys I really want to play. So at the end of the day, I'll probably get to a little Castillo like I'll get to Cole and not feel great about it.
Like, they're my 3 most exposed guys, and Hunter Brown I have a big stand on, more than double the field, and I'm fine with that because I do think he grades out as the best option. But Cole and Castillo, I'm like right at 30%, just barely north of where the field is. So I'm getting to the guys that I think are the best options, but I'm not taking some massive stand that's really separating me from the pack. I have bigger fade stands than I do over the field. I have one big over the field stand other than Hunter Brown that I'm not really proud of, which we'll get to in a bit. But like right now, I essentially don't have Jack Flaherty. I essentially don't have Sonny Gray. Both of these guys are double-digit owned. I basically don't have Tanner Beebe, 10% owned. I'm light on Chris Bassett, 15% owned. I'm under on Sean Manaea. He's 10% owned. So I'm very light on everybody else, but I am getting to those 3 most owned guys. So if you're looking outside of that trio, who stands out?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I don't have like
fun.
No, I don't have like one guy that stands out to me. If forced to answer, I'll just go with the matchup and the lack of ownership in Michael Wacha.
Okay.
Again, he's got basically the same top pitcher percentage as Pivetta, Burns, and Bassett. He's coming in the second lowest owned, slightly behind Pivetta, who's facing the Dodgers. I don't love Wacha here, but there's a lot of, you can poke holes in basically every pitcher on this slate. So while you can poke holes in Wacha for sure, he gets the White Sox at home, and that's all it is.
If he wasn't the meat in this Hunter Brown, Luis Castillo sandwich, man, he would look so much different. But like Hunter Brown above him looks better. I think Luis Castillo at the same salary level, but like looks better. And then he just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I kind of like that given where the ownership is. I don't necessarily think he's incorrectly owned, but I do think he's in a unique spot relative to salary where he's just going to naturally slip through the cracks.
I totally agree with that. I don't think he's like massively underowned because, as you said, Castillo's the same price. And just reflecting on what I said, it feels weird to even tout Wacha at the same exact price as Luis Castillo. And at the end of the day, like, I completely understand why Castillo is getting 5.5 times the ownership that Wacha's getting, but I don't know if he's 5.5 times likely to succeed,
Right. I'm with you.
I don't think there's any doubt that Castillo on any given day has higher upside than Michael Wacha, but
the matchup against the White Sox is helping a lot here for Wacha.
Yeah. And like, I also don't think that this is a slate. And again, who the hell knows, predicting what's going to happen is a fool's errand, but this seems like a slate that's going to be won with the bats. So maybe I don't need 30 from Wacha. If he gets me 18, plus or minus the win, I'll take it and move on.
You want to talk me out of the guy that I have the most of at the bottom for value?
Is it Griffin Canning?
It is.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I was looking right there as well. And it's much more about, at least for me, and then I'll let you talk about the lack of other options I like. So at the end of the day, if I don't really like anyone, I'll just spend down on someone who also isn't great, but gets a great matchup in a great ballpark.
The matchup is fantastic. We agree. Although the A's have like a legitimate implied total for today in Oakland.
They called up their top prospect also.
They did indeed. Yeah. So it's Griffin Canning. He's not an exciting guy to tackle, but 5,800. He's the cheapest arm on today's slate. The matchup itself can only be looked at as positive, at least from a strikeout perspective. These guys K like crazy. The park should limit power, or at least it is set up to limit power. 82 park factor to righties, 82 park factor to lefties over the past 3 seasons. Now, for Canning, he's got a real legitimate problem. Well, he's got more than one legitimate problem. If he didn't even be a lot higher than 5,800, he gives up a lot of power to righties. 200 x ISO over the past year and a half. And it's not much better against lefties. There is certainly a lot of power in the heart of this A's order. I think it's really a boom bust spot for Canning. If the ball stays in the yard, I think he's just going to be fine. I think the park helps him. The strikeout rate's going to help him. If Bleday and Rooker and Langoliers and Seth Brown can get on him, then we might see Griffin Canning leave in the 3rd inning. That's fine for me. Like, I don't really care if he's like average or bad. Both of those things are not going to be enough to get me to a winning spot. But if he can go for 19 or 20 and have one of those crazy days in a spot where strikeout upside is massive, I'll take that for 5% ownership on a day where I don't really like much else at the bottom.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way.
I'm trying to justify something that I'm not like super excited for, but it's happening nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's everything you said, but more emphasis on there just isn't anyone else I really like. So, and the other half of that equation is that there are expensive bats to spend up for. So, yeah, you could make it work without spending down on Canning. There's always going to be cheap enough bats where you can make desirable lineups, but I do think, based on everything we said, just that I don't love the guys up top. I don't love the guys in the mid-range. I certainly think they're better plays than Canning, but Canning is cheap enough where he's at least worth looking at.
And just so everybody knows, my second most exposed stack for today is the Los Angeles Dodgers. Tends to happen if you're going to be getting the Dodgers. You're probably saving some salary at pitcher. So I'm guessing I've got a lot of Dodgers plus Canning lineups right now.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's not just them either. I mean, the Giants are expensive, not to the Ohtani levels, but the Giants throughout their lineup are kind of pricey. So
yeah,
I think that's why we're seeing them not get a ton of love. There's expensive bats kind of all over to spend up for.
I thought I was going to end up getting a lot of the Giants because I think that they are under-owned a bit, but I think that they are so cost prohibitive today that it's becoming a bit problematic. And then you've always got the first game in Coors gimmick, especially coming out of the break. Maybe the Giants will just suck today and we could save that one. Are you getting into any of the other guys at the bottom? Because I've got 12% of Edward Cabrera. I've got 10% of JP Sears. Neither one of those guys are equaling my Griffin Canning, but I'm at the bottom a little bit more than I thought I would be.
Yeah, I actually don't hate Sears. Basically the same price point as Canning, a little bit more expensive and a worse spot. But I think the Sears is the better pitcher right now than Canning. So I don't think Sears is good, but Canning certainly isn't good right now. And he's also really cheap in the same ballpark. Now, we know the Angels are a lot better against left-handed pitching, so it's not even a matchup thing. It's just a price thing. He's in good form right now. Yeah, like he'd be my preferred option. If Cabrera were in a better matchup, then I would like him a lot at 6,600. I think he's clearly the best DFS pitcher of this group, but it's not a good spot. So I get it. I think he belongs in that same boat with Sears and Canning, a little bit more expensive, but also cheap.
What about the opposite way? Flaherty, Sonny Gray. These are guys we haven't even mentioned yet, and we're 20 minutes in.
I'm surprised.
Jack Flaherty is the most expensive pitcher on today's slate, by the way, guys. 9,500.
And I'm surprised that Sonny Gray is the top pitcher in the top pitcher tool today by pretty wide margin. 2% over Flaherty right now. I don't know. I know that Atlanta, I'm slower to buy onto the Atlanta like not being good train than I think a lot of other people are. Now against right-handed pitching, they haven't been great and they've been striking out a lot. So I guess in that sense, I understand it, but still a really tough spot in my eyes. So
Yeah.
I don't love Sonny Gray here. And
No.
Flaherty, it's just picking on the Blue Jays with expensive pitching sucks because they don't strike out a lot. They're not great, but they're also not bad either. They don't strike out. And Flaherty isn't. I just don't want to spend 9,500 on Flaherty here.
Neither do I. I'd be think more likely to get to Flaherty than Gray. You said, we had Gray at around 17% top two pitcher. I mean, it's really flat at the top. It 17, 15, 14, 14, 14, 13. Like there's a bunch of dudes that are in and around that same area. I am much, much lower on Sonny Gray in the same data. I have him around 10% top two pitcher odds. So it's a pretty sizable gap. And that kind of like I agree with that when I just like look at it on the surface. I'm less interested in Sonny Gray. Like I think Garrett Cole has a much bigger ceiling than Sonny Gray does today. And we have it basically the same, but Cole behind him. I just prefer Cole in this situation to Gray and to Flaherty. And then you've got the other two guys that are priced up. Eovaldi's at 9,300, Corbin Burns at 9,100. Both of these guys are projected at sub 10% ownership. Not really guys that I have my eye on. Do you think are you looking in that direction at all?
No.
I'd be more likely to look at Burns, I think.
Yeah, definitely more like, I think Burns is the better DFS pitcher right now, and he's in the better spot and he's cheaper. So I'm totally with you, but even still, like, not a good spot for him. His strikeout stuff has been down a little bit this year. Like I like his ownership because he's not getting the love that Cole and even Sonny Gray is getting, but I do think that especially Cole are better plays, as you mentioned.
And then the whole middle and bottom area is just gross. Like there's this giant gap. This whole 7K range in general. I guess Manaea is probably somebody we should at least briefly touch on. 9.9% owned. Solid matchup against the Marlins. Park certainly helps for negating power. Should a $7,600 Sean Manaea be a little bit more interesting today?
No, I think he's appropriately owned. He's going to get 10%. I expect that. I will say, I think that's on the low end of what he gets just because of the price in the ballpark. I don't think it's a bad play. He's been pretty good this year. And he gets a good matchup in a good ballpark. I view him kind of like JP Spears. I think Manaea is the much safer and better play, but he's also 1,000 more. So I don't know. I don't really love Manaea here, but I don't think he's a bad play, if that makes sense.
I'm a little surprised I'm not getting to more of him. I only have 6%. I think he looks a little bit better than that, given just what's around him, whether that's Stone, Schwellenbach, Eflin, Harrison. Like, I think he's very clearly better than all those guys. I think Cole and Brown and Castillo are just, and I guess Griffin Canning for me, are really just stopping me in my tracks of getting anybody else. But I do like this spot. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Sean Manaea go over 20 today. And like kind of quietly, but just because of the park, I think the ball can just stay in the yard today. He's going to see a lot of righties, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. The other guy I'll bring up that, obviously only a tournament play, but I actually think there's merit tonight is Nick Pivetta. Certainly a low floor spot against the Dodgers. Pivetta is kind of boom or bust in nature anyways, but you get past the top half of this Dodgers lineup and the bottom half is not good. So I think Pivetta strikeout upside alone at 8,800 warrants at least consideration. I mean, he's got a 29% strikeout percentage this year. Like he's been good and he's got upside. So that's all I want to say. Too pricey for the spot, but again, it just goes back to I don't really love pitching on this slate.
Yeah, Pavetta is really interesting. I think I'd be getting more of him if the Dodgers were more owned, but since Pavetta is
Fair.
not all that owned in the Dodgers, outside of Otani, who obviously transcends ownership, um, like I mean, the highest owned guy is Freddie Freeman at 6%. Everybody else is below is 3 or lower. So I think that's stopping me from getting to Pavetta. And then I think it's helping out a little bit just knowing that Pavetta has some problems with the long ball over the past year and a half. 207 x ISO to lefties, 180 to righties. It's been worse this year to righties. It's been 190 to lefties. This is not the park to have issues with power. It's 125 plus park factor to both sides. This is not the team, at least the top of the order for sure, to have issues with power. You just kind of expect one of Otani, Smith, or Freeman to homer here today by default, not to mention anybody else on the team. So I'm happy getting to a bit of the Dodgers side, but there's definitely a scenario where Nick Pivetta goes out there and is striking out 30+% of hitters like he normally does. And all of a sudden you look and it's like, oh, Pivetta had 8 or 9 Ks and he's 5% owned today. Like his upside is as high as anybody else at the top of the list today. You would not be surprised at all to see him go out there and strike out double digits.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like in a vacuum, I would rather get to the Dodgers than Pavetta. I just think there are plenty more offenses in play tonight than pitchers. So
Sure.
that's kind of why I'm at least looking at him, if nothing else.
Pavetta 9+ strikeout. Pavetta 8+ strikeouts is plus 265 on FanDuel. So I mean, we're talking, in between 25 and 30% chance that he goes 8+. That's what you're looking for here today. That's for sure. The line is 6.5 with some juice to the under, but the upside here is massive, especially the bottom of this order. If it is Taylor and Outman, Taylor projects in Steamer with a 32% K rate, Outman at 31. Like if you can survive that first lap through the top of the order, you can find some strikeouts at the bottom.
That's all it is.
Any other pitchers that we need to be talking about here?
No, I don't think so. Like again, there are good pitchers on this slate that we didn't even mention. Matt Waldron, but it's just the spots they're in and price tags make them out of play. So yeah, I think we covered basically the guys that I'm looking at least.
Okay. Well, we do want to give a little bit of a shout out right now to us. Hit the like button, guys. That would be the best thing that you guys could do. It helps out a ton. It's always good to get the likes up on a show. People are just trickling back in. I'm expecting Monday to be the real jump off point. Coming back on a Friday is a bit of a tough sell. But the people that are here, we love you guys. So thank you for being here. We're sponsored by DraftKings Pick 6. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about DraftKings Pick 6 and some of the other pick'em sites in the near future. And by near future, I mean starting Monday, 9 a.m. Monday through Friday, Odds Shopper Live. I'm going to go live, break down everything that we can get across the pick'em sites, across the sports books. We're going to be loading in bets constantly. Now that we are finally back from the break and I'm settled in, Odds Shopper Live coming to you guys starting on Monday. So if you're looking for bets, that's where you want to be. But we'll also be hitting the pick'em sites. And DraftKings Pick 6 is going to be a priority there. Very different experience than what you're getting at other sites. Your payouts are going to be a little bit more dynamic. There are definitive strategies for DraftKings Pick 6 that don't exist for the other sites. Exploiting those things are going to be very fun. We're going to do that on Odd Shopper Live every single morning. But you guys can sign up for DraftKings Pick 6 right now by clicking the link in the description or potentially one that pops up in chat. Alrighty. Let's talk hitting. I'm going to give you my top exposed stack to start, and then we'll talk through everything else. Currently, the team that I am getting to the most today, it's a little scary. It's the Baltimore Orioles. Where do you land on the Orioles today? Because I think they're just kind of floating in the middle of the pack of everything.
Yeah, they are. I always like them when they're going to be low owned, and so tonight fits that bill. Evaldi's good, so
yeah,
I think that they're low owned for a reason, considering their price tags. For me, like if I were playing 150 tonight, I could see myself easily getting to 10% Orioles here.
Yeah.
Double the field, 2.5 times the field. In playing 3 lineups though, or 4 lineups, 5 lineups, however many I end up playing, I struggle to get to them over like the Giants, considering what the Giants ownership is right now. That being said, like Greg and I talk about this a lot, like ownership gets condensed much more in those, higher dollar single entry type contests.
For
So
sure.
the Giants will be higher owned in that type of stuff. And the Orioles won't be because they're so expensive in a tough spot on paper. So I do like them for tournaments. I'm just not sure I'm going to be able to prioritize them.
I'm really curious to see where my data and the site's data converges on the Orioles, because this is the team that I have the biggest gap on. We have them sixth in top stack at 5.5%. I have them third at a little over 6.5%. So that is helping. And then we have them 14th in top value at 3%. Not that I have it massively different, but I have them eighth at 4%. That's 33% higher than we have it. So I'm just something in my data is just showing Baltimore as slightly better. And that combination with the complete lack of ownership, they are 15th of 22 teams today in ownership. They're unowned. That I think is what's getting me to Baltimore and getting me that like unique path to the top. And then I mentioned earlier, my second most exposed team that I don't think anybody will be surprised to hear is the Dodgers. Just infinite power potential on the slate. I'm going to throw it to you now, though. What team do you have your eye on? Who is your primary option for today?
And I will say this, just going back to Baltimore real quick, like it does stand out how high they are in the top stack tool against a pitcher of Eovaldi's caliber.
Yeah.
I think that kind of tells you all you need to know. Now, kind of with pitching, it's flat after the Giants, so take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, all this stuff could change, but I'm going to say an offense kind of similar to Baltimore here. Now they're lower in the top stack tool. They're also lower owned, also expensive. Atlanta, again, kind of alluded to it earlier when I talked about how I'm less willing to buy into like Atlanta's not good or Atlanta's a team you want to pick on with right-handed pitching. I still think this offense is, one of the highest upside offenses in all of baseball, even without Acuna, even without Harris. Like, certainly it's not as good without those guys. But when you talk about what DraftKings rewards, the Braves have it with a little speed, up top, especially with Albies, but mostly power. Albies, Olsen, Riley, Ozuna. I think these guys are going to be like unowned, and it's hard to get there, but that's part of the reason they're going to be so low owned. So I think Baltimore is like more likely to get there than Atlanta, but I don't think by that much. And I think Atlanta will be even lower owned than teams like Baltimore.
I like the shout, especially because you get Sonny Gray, 20% owned on the opposite side. I think that has a little bit more utility too. So I do like the Atlanta shout. I get to Atlanta a lot. Today is not one of those days, unfortunately. And I think the lack of pay downs is, well, it's not stopping me from getting to the shitty pay down pitchers, but it's not prioritizing Atlanta for me. I would certainly like to get a little bit more of the Braves as this day goes on. As of right
Well,
now,
ultimately, that's the problem with Atlanta. Like, you have to concede. Not just do you have to spend down on your pitcher like Clay Canning, then you have to play Atlanta over a team like the Dodgers. You're just giving up a lot as far as projections go.
22nd in value for the Braves today. That is dead last of all of the teams. They are very expensive. I had 20th, but we're not talking about different numbers here. Basically the same in top stack, middle of the pack, but 1.2% ownership, dead last of any team. I do think the Braves look a little bit better than the lowest owned team on the slate. San Francisco is the team grading out as the number one stack. It is not particularly close. They are twice as likely to be the top stack as any other team on the slate. They're in Colorado. Cal Quantrill on the hill for the Rockies. The Giants have a 6+ run implied total. No one is basically only the Royals are within a run. It's a fantastic spot for the Giants. That said, they are aggressively expensive. Everybody is at least 4K, couple guys north of 5K. They look great on paper. I don't think there's going to be any disagreement. Not nearly as much ownership as you would expect right now, just because of how expensive these guys are.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm buying that. But if it holds, then I'll play the Giants because, like you said, if it's so prohibitive that people just don't want to play them, the first game in Coors, all that stuff, I'll play them. I think they're in the best spot by far on the slate. And I know that, again, you're spending up on guys like you're playing Jorge Soler at 5K over, insert better hitter right now that's 5K, but you're playing on the stack. You're playing against Quantrill. You're playing against this awful Colorado bullpen. I'll flip it though and say I also like the Rockies quite a bit. Harrison is nothing special at all.
No.
And I do think this lineup sets up considerably better against left-handed pitching. And they've got some power. They're coming off a series which they just set the record for how many home runs they hit in that series. Now they hit a shit ton on Sunday, but I don't know. I think they have power at low ownership, and that's kind of what we're looking for.
This is another team that I usually get to quite frequently, especially in situations where they're not really pulling a ton of ownership. They're fifth in ownership at 6% in the aggregate. Maybe we see this look a little bit different. I wouldn't mind getting to some Colorado. I currently don't have it. I have just very different exposures than what I was expecting when I first looked over the data. The third team that I'm getting to here is actually against one of the pitchers that I'm getting a lot of. So I'm pretty happy to see that I have a decent enough stand on the Rays right now. I'm equal-ish to the field on Garrett Cole, but we know that Garrett Cole can give up power. Like, that dude is destined to give up home runs when he pitches. Whether he's getting the strikeouts to save himself, that's going to be the question. But there's certainly enough power in this Rays lineup that I'm kind of excited to have a chunk of it against that ownership of Garrett Cole.
Oh, yeah, they've got power. They don't run a ton, but they have power. This game is in New York, correct?
Correct.
So nice ballpark upgrade for Tampa offensively.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's in New York. Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I thought you were going to say Oakland. It kind of caught me off guard, and I really don't know what to do with Oakland here because we talked about Canning, and he's not good.
No.
I struggle to see on a slate this size with really good weather spots, Oakland winning the slate. That said, they've had 3 games. I think they've have 2 or 3 games this year where they've scored like 15 plus runs.
They're a weird team, man. I get that. I feel like I get them wrong every time. I don't have them today outside of Seth Brown as a one-off. I think the biggest problem for getting to Oakland is the order of their bats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Outfield, 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 and then you get to catcher for Langoliers at 5. They become a difficult team to stack because you don't ever really want to prioritize like 7, 8, 9, but that's where you're getting second base and third base and shortstop. And you're getting those spots that make it a little bit easier to stack. Whereas for the A's, I mean, like, you can't even stack 1 through 5 for this team because you run out of roster. Like, you got to leave an outfielder out by default. And I think that is what's stopping me and like stopping the public from getting to them a bit more.
That's such a great point. I know you and Adam used to talk about this a lot. Like teams like Kansas City, for instance, are much more desirable because you get the shortstop, the catcher, where Oakland, everything you said, not only is it just really you're using up optimal positions, but it's also impossible to stack them because they just have so many outfielders. So I'm with you. I'll say that Seth Brown at 2,600 now with first base eligibility, that helps him. I think he's a perfectly fine one-off. And I don't mind mini stacks, but you really have to like sell your soul to fully stack Oakland here. And I don't think this is the slate for it.
Yeah, I have 10% of Seth Brown. I basically don't have anything else from Oakland.
Right.
Yeah, you mentioned the Royals. It's the perfect example. Third base outfield for Adam Frazier, short, first, center, second. Like, it's so much easier to stack up a team that isn't just loaded up on it. Every team that's playing today has 3 outfielders at a minimum that you could, like, essentially 3 outfielders that you could roster. Outfield is the easiest place to find additional bats and to funnel those elsewhere. Oakland is the exact opposite of what you're looking for.
And honestly, the Giants are kind of in the Oakland boat, like not quite as extreme, but they also have a few outfielders and all their guys. Most of the guys you want to play are outfield only.
No MPEs or anything at the top either. So, when you're going to be expensive and you don't have a ton of MPEs, like, that is also going to be a very limiting factor.
For sure.
You have your eye on anybody else?
Again, I think that because of like the kind of volatile pitching on this slate, I think that there are a lot of teams in play. And I think that, kind of one team we just talked about, Kansas City, they're projected to be the highest owned team on the slate. So I think they're worth talking about. I get it. Chris Flexen is not good. They're pretty affordable, especially outside of like the wits of the world. I see Dairon Blanco projected to be like one of the highest owned hitters on the slate, and that is pulling up their ownership. Like, Witt is obviously projected to be one of the highest owned, but Blanco is coming in as the highest owned outfielder on the slate. I'm not getting that. Did I miss something? Like Frazier had let off a couple games for them. I know they dropped Miguel Garcia, but do we have him projected leading off or something? Because that one
We
is bizarre to me.
we must. I have Frazier in that spot right now, so
Yeah,
I'm not getting that same sort of option. But if he's leading off, he's going to look great.
it's
Like I don't
pulling
think.
up the ownership right now, though. You know.
Oh yeah, for sure. In a pretty extreme manner.
Mm-hmm. Because
Yeah,
he's like he's going
I
to
have
be
them a little bit
1%
less
owned.
owned. Yeah, I have them a little bit less
Okay,
owned because I don't have him. But I think
I think they're
Frazier
a
looks good
perfectly
in that
fine
spot
stack.
too.
Yeah, totally agree. I think Colorado is the one that I'm looking at. It's kind of a lower owned tournament stack that's not too far off the board. The thing that I like about the Baltimore call out and the Dodgers is, yeah, they're in low floor spots, but who cares? Like you kind of said with pitching, like you want a chance to get to the top, and teams like the Orioles and Dodgers give you that.
They do. Trying to look through. Like, there's not really any crazy ownership for hitting. Nobody got to 10%. We touched on the Royals already. We touched on the Giants a bit. I mean, the second most owned team right now is the Angels here against the A's. I'm not surprised by it, but like, it's a lot of ownership going into the A's right now in a not ideal park for fantasy.
Yeah, I'm way off or the Angels here. First off, they're getting owned because of how cheap they are. I don't even really like the expensive pitching here. So I'm not going to spend up on expensive pitching just to play chalky Angels in Oakland. This
Yeah.
ownership just makes me kind of like Sears more. Both these teams stink. Like the Angels on a 22 game slate or 11 game slate, excuse me, should never be the second highest owned team in Oakland. Like, no.
Yeah. The problem is the Angels are free. We're their number one in our top value. The
Right.
most
No.
expensive bat in the lineup is projected for me right now is Kevin Pillar at 4,400. They've got a couple 2K guys, a bunch of 3K guys. They're very easy to get to. Their implied total looks solid. I'm not surprised that it's happening, but I think their ceiling is not nearly as represented. Like they're 9.5% owned. They're 5 and change percent to be the top stack. That's not for me.
They're like the only team that's like over-owned on this slate in my eyes. Like they're
Yeah.
the only team that I just don't want to get to because of ownership. Even their ownership like isn't crazy. I just think that a lot of lineups that stack the Angels are going to be funneled with like the pitchers up top, Angel stacks, and then expensive one-offs. That's not really where I'm trying to go. Again,
Same.
it does make me like Sears more. Like the Angels aren't good either. I know they're better
No.
against left-handed pitching, but they're not good.
Are there any other teams that we need to touch on?
I don't think so. Again, like there are a bunch of teams that and what's happening on this slate because we're projecting cores to not get a lot of love. It's just flat everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you think it ends up playing out like that because of how expensive and position prohibitive the Giants are?
I think it does. I don't really see anything in my data that's
Same.
pointing me to like seeing somebody being. I think the Giants could pull up a little bit. I think they might be a little lighter than they should be, but I don't think we're going to see a major spread. I think everything after. I think it's very clearly Giants 1. I think the Royals are pretty clearly second. And then I think 3 through like 12 to 15, you can kind of pick whoever you want.
100% with you there. I know that we have the Mets here right now, and they're coming in with nice leverage. I don't mind the Mets here. I just don't think they're any different from any one of the other teams that you know are in the 3 through 12 range. I'll say this about the Mets. Like, it is interesting them versus a team like Baltimore coming in with very similar ownership, very similar top stack percentages. I think Baltimore is clearly the better offense, but the Mets aren't bad either. And they also have power and run. And they're in the much better matchup against a volatile Cabrera and a bad Marlins bullpen. Now they're also in the worst ballpark. So I think Baltimore and the Mets actually look really comparable to me.
Yeah, I would have liked some Mets. I don't have them, but I like the point that you're making there. Cabrera obviously has the ability to put guys on. If you're putting guys on for free, I mean, the top of this Mets lineup is loaded with power. The park is going to save Cabrera in this spot. If this were in New York, it would look a little bit different. And they're expensive. You know, they've got a couple guys north of 5K. A lot of the top of that order is like 4,500 plus. So it's not the cheapest stack in the world for the Mets, but I think our data is really showing out what they are. Third in top stack, 17th in top value. A great team to get to if you can find it, and not all that owned outside of JD Martinez.
And like, this is not a team I expect ownership to rise on. Like,
No,
this is
not at all.
one where, you know, we expect San Fran or maybe KC to get a little bit more love. It's going to come from like the Mets and the Rockies. Like, the Angels are going to get love, and so will the Giants and Royals. I think basically everyone else is going to be, you know, or at least ownership, not a problem.
Anybody else that we need to touch on? Anybody else that we need to talk about? I'm looking at my most exposed hitters: Ohtani, Santander, Gunnar Henderson. I feel very happy with those names. I don't really have anything else. I think it's like it's a pretty easy slate to talk about, but it's also hard because I think that there's 15 teams that look the same.
Yeah, totally with you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Like, I'm looking at all these teams, and I don't think most of them aren't bad plays, but there's nothing that really stands out that makes me want to talk about them. Like St. Louis versus Schwellenbach. If you told me you were into St. Louis tonight, I wouldn't have any arguments with you. I just don't think they stand out, you know, and that's kind of what I'm seeing all over the board.
Chat, you got anything for us before we dip on out of here? Because I think we have reached critical mass, but if there's something that we haven't touched on yet, be happy to do it if you have an idea. And hit that like button if you haven't done it yet. I've touched on every team that I have. You want home run picks?
I was going to say, I know that people. Yeah, I mean, if you're down for it, I know that people like that.
I'm in. Who you got?
I hadn't even. I'm going to go with. Again, I'm going to go with lefty on lefty, Ryan McMahon.
Okay. Don't hate it. Let me look at my list here. Ooh, I think I found mine. I'm pretty sure I have mine. Just want to make sure that I'm on the right path here. Come on, show the hitters. There we go. Oh, yeah, I got it. Brandon Lau.
That's
the one. That's the one. He's homering. He's homering.
I love that.
Marvin says, Boston not getting any love against Stone today.
Yeah, they're like in that like St. Louis for Schwellenbach bucket. Stone isn't bad is the thing. So like, I don't think he's great, but like, he's not bad. The Dodgers have a good bullpen. I don't think Boston's are a bad play here. I mean, Devers is never a bad play. Jarren Duran, all of them, but they're also expensive and they're not like in a great spot. I mean, you're playing them over Baltimore, San Fran, Kansas City, and it's like, I don't like them more than those teams, but I also don't think they're bad plays.
You're getting a good park. The matchup's fine. They're 6% owned in the aggregate. That's sixth of all teams. That feels about right. They're like really hard to say anything interesting about. Everything that they're getting is exactly what I think they should get.
Yeah, to that point, if you're going to say Boston's getting no love, no team is getting any love, and which might be true, but that's also kind of the point.
Well, I have nothing else to add here. We've got MLB Live Before Lock coming up later today at 6 p.m. when we head into the weekend. And then Monday, we start it all up again, making the full charge all the way until late August when you guys get your NFL back. I can continue to just rest on my laurels until we get back to the NBA in October. Anything else you want to add?
No, man, it was fun being back doing a show with you.
Couldn't agree more. It was good to be back. I'm going to take 2 more days and not do MLB DFS shows. Guys, thank you for being here. MLB Live Before Lock coming up at 6 p.m. Shout out to DraftKings Pick 6, the sponsor of this show. You should sign up for DraftKings Pick 6. That was hard to say. I don't know why it was. Link in the description. Good luck today, everybody. We'll talk to you later.